2, Chapter 1 of The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, we dive into the findings of Ward's research. It's presented as a character study on his distant relative, Joseph Curwen. We learn that Curwen fled from Salem, Massachusetts to Providence, Rhode Island, for fear of being connected to the growing witchcraft panic. He builds and then he rebuilds a house in Olney Court, and he acquires a farm on the Pawtuxet Road. Curwen becomes a successful merchant, but the townsfolk and his peers distrust him. He's been seen about the cemetery. Eerie cries are heard coming from his farm, and some of the lay people involved with his shipping business have been known to go missing. He seems to be conducting experiments, and worst of all, he never seems to age. Mr. John Merritt, who visits with Joseph Curwen, is repulsed to find that he owns a copy of the forbidden Necronomicon. Chapter 2 shows us Joseph Curwen reacting to his negative image. He's doing good things for the community, and he even decides to marry, if only to improve the look of his social life. But the marriage comes off as crass and engenders the anger of his bride's former fiancé, Ezra Whedon. Joseph Curwen goes on to become a father, but people can sense the greater ruse at work, and it's Ezra Whedon who vows vengeance and watches him with every chance he can get. What is unique to Lovecraft's writing style is his ability to negotiate the flow of time, though it can be a mind-bender for the reader. In the first 2 chapters, we experience the effects of time when we felt like it was the present day because of Ward's disappearance. It was jarred by a leap into his past and was mended for the way it led up to the time of his conducted research. In this section, however, we're forced to juggle our perception of time as it pertains to the larger narrative. We have the study of Joseph Curwen peppered with references to Ward performing his work in the library, musing on the details, and discussing the subject with his father. This is a blending of the past with something like the sub-present, because we don't know all of Ward's story. Then we have the tale of Curwen himself, of which no less than 21 year dates are mentioned, ranging from 1636 to 1816. That is, if I haven't missed anything. Our minds are having to perform mental gymnastics, being pulled from one era to the other, with Curwen's lifespan jumping around like a hop frog within the mix. It is tedious storytelling, but what it does is that it creates a timestamp for the history of publishing itself, because no one that I know of can get away with writing like this anymore. In my opinion, it's this painstaking attention to the details of time that tells me I'm dealing with a rich literary artifact. In the previous video, I had to stop listing allusions right away because there's just too many of them to list. It would take up an entire book. What I will say is that the story's historicity gives the narrative a particular contour because we are viewing the material in terms of Ward's findings. We are discovering Curwen's life as Ward learns the information. We're not looking at Joseph Curwen, we're looking at Ward looking at Joseph Curwen. The effect is we don't feel like we're experiencing early American colonial life, but rather we feel like we're in the library ourselves, digging through the archives, learning what we can. We are treated not only to the details of history, but we're treated to the thrill of what it's like to learn about the subjects we're interested in. It seems to me that the story of Charles Dexter Ward could have been supported by a mere couple of paragraphs about Joseph Curwen, but we know this isn't how it really happened. We are drawn into copious accounts that describe an entire world apart from our own. Modern-day editors and agents would have sliced and diced this masterpiece to death, and we're glad that such a catastrophe never occurred. The success of the novel, in terms of its worth for the enjoyment of reading, has great value in the elaborate scope of its passages. The language is skillfully crafted, and I'm inclined to believe that readers love this sort of thing more than they let on. I mean, think about it. A book like Finnegan's Wake makes Lovecraft's writing look appealing. There's something about the richness of this kind of writing that has me perplexed by the people who love to criticize it, especially considering the many other classics that follow in this very trend. There are 2 online versions of the text that I'm following, so imagine my curiosity when I referred to the printed edition and found that the opening chapter did not have an epigraph. I noticed this only when I encountered the passage rewritten in Part 2, Chapter 1. This kind of thing has to do, in some ways, with authorial intent, and if anyone has seen the original copy who knows whether or not it has an epigraph, please let me know in the comments. Of course, we can't move on to the next video without noting that the Necronomicon has been mentioned in the case of Charles Dexter Ward. This is a fascinating thing that Lovecraft does with his work when he ties his stories together by alluding to them as he writes. Everyone knows about this trait of his because it's been referred to throughout the years as the Cthulhu mythos. In this case, the Necronomicon is mentioned with reference to the subterranean activity that we've seen in his short story entitled The Festival. We love hearing about the Necronomicon because it is purportedly the scariest book ever written, which may explain how amused I can become when I reflect on the idea that he made the whole thing up.